Good evening. Good morning.
Hello, Doris.
Yeah.
Hello, welcome. Welcome to the conference.
Hello.
We can see you on the screen. I'm not sure you can see us.
Yeah, I can see the audience. It's like a bit pixeled, so I can't really.
Ah, okay.
If you step here, she'll see you. Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
There you go.
Hi. I'm
Hi.
Janet Smelverwise, and I'm chairing this part of
Yes.
the conference. So welcome to this session. I was told you weren't quite sure of how much time you had, so we're kind of aiming for each presenter to take maybe 30 minutes and then have some questions, but it's flexible in terms of the overall timing, because we have the room booked for however long we need it. But about half an hour would be great if you're happy to do that.
Okay, yes, that's fine. Perfect. Thank you so much, Janet.
Hang on, I'm just going around the other side of the desk. Do we have everything?
No, everything is set up.
Okay, and will you move the slides?
Yeah.
Okay. There's someone here ready to move the slides on for you. So, and you're in Los Angeles, is that right?
Berkeley, so
okay.
more northern California. It's not that warm here, which is interesting for working.
Okay, so if I could just hand over to you then and say thank you for joining us here today, and we're looking forward to your presentation.
Okay, yeah, thank you so much. Also, like, many thanks for the organizing team to make this kind of talk possible. Like, Bea and Bojan were really helpful. Yeah, it's because of financial reasons that I can't really come to the UK now. I would have really liked to join you and meet you all there and socialize with you, but I ran out of research money, and now I'm just living off my teaching, which is like teaching, like I just was teaching 2 courses in Austria, and that's not very much money. So, but I hope you now have the PowerPoint in front of you. Is this?
Yes.
Okay?
Yes, we do.
Okay, good, great. So you will see I have many affiliations, but I don't get paid anymore for these affiliations I have. So my title is Reproductive Ethics, an example of an allied disability queer feminist justice. And I will present some parts of my current work on a non-normative disability queer feminist ethics on assisted reproductive genetic technologies, which is obviously still a work in progress. So my research consists of 2 parts. So one is the applied ethics, which deals with reproductive challenges of people with disabilities, transgender and intersex people. And the second is a meta-ethics, which draws on the outcome of the first part and gives descriptions and explanations of crucial elements and notions of a disability queer feminist meta-ethics. So yeah, now the next slide, please. The outline of the presentation looks like this. I give a short general description of the aims of a reproductive ethics, which stands for Allied Disability Queer Feminist Justice. Then the second point will then be like looking closer at the technologies, so at the ARGTs and their non-normative potentials, and also look at the negative aspects of ARGTs, which are eugenics and biocapitalism, and the challenges for disabled, transgender, and intersex people. And if I still have time, let's see about, so I give an outlook on the meta-ethics, which I'm working on now. Okay, so I'll start with the first point, so the next slide, please, which is a general description of an ethics, which stands for an allied disability queer feminist justice. So it is a critique of the supposed neutrality of ethical approaches and of heteronormative, colonizing, racist, ethnicizing, and able-bodied, able-minded perspectives. which means it confronts them with practices of undoing gender, heterosexuality, and traditional family structures, and with strategies of decolonization, anti-racism, anti-able-bodiedness, and anti-able-mindedness. It has an emphasis on non-normative bodies, sexualities, and forms of procreation, which lead to new kinds of kinship and which works against the norm or deviation or pathology dichotomy, and is against ethnic and racist categories. So next slide, please. The main aim of this disability queer feminist ethics is reproductive justice, which, I quote, exists when all people have the social, political, and economic power and resources to make healthy decisions about our gender, bodies, and sexuality for ourselves, our families, and our communities. Reproductive justice aims to transform power inequalities and create long-term systematic change, and relies on communities most impacted by reproductive oppression. The reproductive justice framework recognizes that all individuals are part of communities and that our strategies must lift up entire communities to support individuals. So that's a quote from the Asian Communities for Reproductive Justice from 2005. So the reproductive justice movement has its origin in the 1980s in reproductive health organizations of women of color in the US. And therefore this movement, or like a concept or framework, not only has a focus on gender, but also a strong emphasis on race and class. So next slide, please. Depending on the use and applications of ARGTs, I'm now already in the second point, their outcomes can be either normative or normalizing, or non-normative or non-normalizing. So I'm going to look now at the queer potentials in the ARGTs, which can be seen in the non-normative or non-normalizing outcomes concerning, for example, sexuality, because obviously sexuality is non-normalized because heterosexual intercourse is no longer necessary for reproduction with the use of these technologies. And also the gendered body for pregnancy does not need to be female gendered anymore. For example, trans men getting pregnant. Thomas Beattie was a famous case, but there were other ones before him. And also concerning kinship. So traditional forms of kinship, consanguinity, and are questions. And for example, lesbian families created. So these technologies create the possibility of a new reproductive logic where, for example, disabled people and LGBTIQ people are able to form non-genetically and even sometimes genetically related families. So now we come to the negative aspects of these technologies. Next slide, please. So new eugenics is one of them. So reproductive technologies have invented, as we heard, a new concept of reproductive rights because new ethical and political questions have arisen with them and their agents, such as genetic testing, which threatens to be a new eugenics. These genetic testing techniques are, for example, there are kind of new direct-to-consumer non-invasive genetic tests offered by companies such as 23andMe, which only need, for example, some blood drops of the mother for a prenatal DNA sequencing, or also the famous notorious pre-implantation genetic diagnosis, which tests the IVF embryos. Another recent technology in ARGT is the mitochondrial replacement in IVF, also known as the three-parent IVF, because it produces genetic changes to the IVF embryos. So mitochondrial replacement in IVF has only been permitted in February 2015, so this year, by the UK Parliament, being also the first state in the world to legalize this technique. So all these technologies have the potential to be tools for new eugenic and therefore preventing, for example, intersex or disabled babies from being born. The danger here is these technologies bring a reinforcement of able-mindedness, racial differences, and of heteronormativity. So the next negative point is biocapitalism. The fertility clinics market is highly commercialized. Donors and gametes can circulate, and reproductive tourism exists to countries which offer lower cost ARGT services, for example India, or which accept LGBTQI individuals, for example California. Carrie Thompson came to the conclusion that biomedicine makes both production and reproduction parts of the economy. So next slide, please. Another concern is biocolonialism, as Mia Mingus points out. Biocolonialism can be found in technologies concerning reproductive control and assisted reproductive technologies. For example, as we see in surrogates in India, or Latina and African American surrogates in the US, or for example, Ukrainian surrogates for European couples. So on the next slide, you will see the website where you can find this chart of this description what biocolonialism is and how it's involved in medicine, in science, and so on. So the next slide, please, is then looking closer at how or who is doing the labor in ARGTs. So for material feminists, the embryos in the laboratories are materialized products of labor. This view contradicts the general opinion that researchers and the employees of the clinics, laboratories are doing the work, and women are just donating their bodily materials. Ute Kalender names it a work which produces and makes primary resources available. Next slide, please. In countries where egg donations are legal, paid migrants with insecure visa or residency status are often recruited as egg donors. In this case, the position as a worker for primary resources and precarious citizenship are interwoven. So, for example, in Spain, these are often migrants from Eastern European countries. Interesting enough is that queer egg cells are particularly highly sought after and contribute to a certain homonormativity, and in the case of the UK, to a homonationality if the economy of a state or country makes profit out of biotechnology. So, for example, lesbian women who have a 20% higher positive outcome in ARGTs because they have no real causes for sterility. It is solely the productive sexual act which is missing, and this is why they make use of ARGT. In the UK, lesbians are now specially targeted by fertilization clinics for egg-sharing programs. So they donate their eggs and get the ARGT treatment cheaper or for free. Their donor eggs count as a primary resource of high quality for regenerative medicine, which also includes stem cell research and cloning, for example. We therefore need an alliance of the most precarious human beings in this era or in these technologies, who are mostly involved in the exchange of goods by the biomedical complex and pharma industries, namely the disabled, trans and intersex people and commodity workers who make the bodily resources available, such as migrants or women of color and Eastern European women. So next slide, please. So the challenges for disabled trans and intersex people. Disabled people have a long history with forced sterilization because they are often seen as unfit parents or are even defined as asexual. Depending on their disability, ARGTs can be the only option to reproduce, but some doctors do not recommend reproduction because of fear of a disabled offspring. And as I mentioned already in the negative aspects of ARGT, genetic testing and mitochondrial replacement in IVF often deselects and avoid disability and thus differentiate between desirable and undesirable bodies. Yeah, I think I still have time. Yeah, so I quote now from Mia Mingos. Disability activists have voiced critical concerns about the use of prenatal diagnostic tests and ARGTs to select against the birth of a child with differing abilities. LGBTI people and queer communities offer models of family which centralize intentional relationships and long-standing kinship, challenging the value placed exclusively on biological children while simultaneously affirming our rights to use ARGTs to create families. So next slide, please. The challenges for transgender people. So by law, depending on the country they live in, trans people are often required to undergo gender reassignment surgery. Yeah, on the next slide, you see a map of Europe with the countries which still require sterilization. So there are still 21 countries. This was in 2015, so they are marked in red. And yeah, but the European Court of Human Rights decided in 2015 that the requirement of permanent infertility, which comes with gender reassignment surgery, is not compatible anymore with human rights. So some trans people who have had hormone treatment or who were sterilized depend on the use of ARGT also for procreation. Yes, so next slide. So, however, not every fertilizing clinic accepts them, and even having been admitted, they are not treated in the same way. So on this slide, we see the title of a newspaper article I found from a Canadian newspaper, which this article tells a story about a transgender couple who were looking for ARGT treatment, and they had to go to many different clinics until they got really treated in a good way. So the thing is that doctors treat them and the hospital employees treat them in a quick and impersonal way, and they may have to pay even higher storage fees for the eggs and sperms. Next slide, please. I think that's then the picture of the couple. So you can already go on to the next slide. Numbers and studies show that the demand for ARGTs for trans people is high. So the numbers are between 37 and 40, and even more than half of, for example, European trans people in this study who would have wanted to preserve their fertility if it would have been possible at their time. So next slide, I think that's then showing another study. Okay, but I will continue now with intersex. So next slide, please. The cases with inter people are similar because most of them had kind of forced or not consented surgeries in order to adjust their bodies to the gendered medical norms, and their ability to reproduce was diminished. Or it can also be, if they didn't have surgery, that their intersex condition means that they are unable to reproduce. Many of them rely also on ARGTs in order to procreate and face discrimination in fertilizing clinics, or they are not allowed to reproduce because of fear of inter-offspring. I've already mentioned the different methods of genetic testing, which also prevent intersex embryos to be kind of implanted. So as a conclusion, I would like to quote Paul Preciado. So therefore it's only logical that Preciado describes heterosexuality as a political assisted reproductive technology, which is organized and maintained by some states. So Preciado talks in this case about France, which does not allow the use of ARGD, for example, same-sex partners, or for certain heterosexual persons who live, for example, outside of a couple. So still in Austria, I think it's also denied for single women, or for example, for poor people who can't afford the treatment, or for trans people, asexual, or also, as I mentioned, disabled people. These groups build a reproductive minority, so referring as well to the word sexual minority, and for them it is forbidden to pass their genetic material just because they are not able to perform a heterosexual sex act. These groups of people are politically sterilized. The political and economic fight in order to have access to ARGD is connected to the depathologization of their lives and to having the control over their own reproductive material. Okay, so I think, I don't know if I have still time to outline some of the important concepts for the meta-ethics.
Yes, go ahead. Yes.
Okay, good. So I'm just looking at my slides now. Good. So I mentioned already like the notion and concept of justice with the reproductive justice movement. So next slide, please. I will continue then with ontology and intersectionality. So in order to look at these ethical issues raised by ARGTs, I use ideas coming from new materialisms, which after the constructionist turn give attention to bodies and materialities again and rethink the agency of matter in a non-essentializing way. So Karin Barard's idea of interaction serves as an example, which are mutually transformative interplays, and therefore implying that there are no borders between biological material and socio-cultural aspects, and showing that objects or matter are also performatively constructed. So maybe I don't really go into the methods now. That's a bit like maybe misleading, so we jump over the next slide. And Barrett, for example, calls for an ethical onto-epistemology that takes the intertwining of ethics, knowledge, and being seriously, and this is why intersectionality is another important concept for this ethics. So intersectionality, this concept comes from Kimberly Crenshaw, who mentioned that the intersectionality experience within Black women is more powerful than the sum of their race and sex. Patricia Hyde Collins developed this idea further and argues that the cultural patterns of oppression are not only interrelated, but are bound together and influenced by the intersectional system of society, such as race, gender, class, and ethnicity. Next slide, please. Okay, that was already the last one. Okay, sorry. Good. Was it? Oh no, there's still another one here. Furthermore, as alliances between different people with various backgrounds that focus on interdependencies should be built within this ethics, the queer assemblage mentioned by Pua is useful as it draws on mutually implicated and messy networks. So assemblage is a translation from the French enchancement, so my French is not really good, in Deleuze and Godard's work, which means design, layout, organization, arrangement, relations, and the emphasis is on the relations between patterns. With the help of this assemblage in a Deleuzian sense and attention to ontology in tandem with epistemology, affect in conjunction with representational economies within which bodies interpenetrate, swirl together and transmit affects and effects to each other as well. That was a quote from Pura, becomes possible. Also, Antje Engels neologism queerversity best describes the aims of this queer assemblage or arrangement. Here, her new concept stands not only for the dismantling of hierarchies and structural inequalities, but also for the recognition of differences, which elude categorization. The common diversity politics of well-defined positions of identities and differences is undermined, and instead queerversity produces irritations and discontinuities of established imaginations of normalcy. So by analogy, I also suggest a queerversity, which undermines creating hierarchies and further categorizations of disabled bodies and minds. Okay, that was my presentation so far. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you. Okay, so we
questions, please. I know it's still work in progress, so it might have maybe sounded like bits and pieces of something, but yeah, I'm still working on it.
Okay, so do we have some questions? Any? Yes?
It's not a question. Hi Doris, my name is John. I'm over in the corner. It's not a question, it's just it's not a correction for you, but for Tegu, because I'm really happy to say that they need to change their map, because Ireland is now not a green, which doesn't recognise gender, the right to gender recognition. It's now a blue, so it allows and doesn't force sterility either on people who choose to change their gender legally. So it's just a comment.
So which country was that?
Ireland.
Ireland. Okay, yeah, that's true. Yeah, I heard about it. Okay, thank you. Yeah.
Thank you. Any other questions, comments, or sharing of experiences?
So it seems like everyone is tired after the long day.
Yeah, it's the end of our day here, so maybe people are tired and still processing some of the food for thought that you've given us here at the end of the day today. If there are no further questions, then can we just thank Doris very much for joining us here today, and wish you well with the ongoing work that you're doing in that area, and thank you again for your presentation. Thank you. Okay, so that's the end of this final panel for today.